Welcome on Easy Learning. Now in this part of the video of Story of English Rainbow class 11th, I am going to cover chapter 3, Old English. Earlier I have covered the two chapters, chapter 1 and chapter 2, and you can watch the videos on the videos playlist. In this part of the video, I am going to read the chapter Old English, and you should also read with me as many times it is possible to get your pronunciation correct. The first period in the history of English is referred to by one of the following names: Old English, Anglo-Saxon and Anglo-Celtic. However, the earlier two names are more popular and used more often. The history of English begins with the coming of the Anglo-Saxons from Europe to mainland Britain. This period is from 449 AD to 1066 AD. These two dates signify two major invasions that changed the course of history. The Anglo-Saxons were fierce, warlike tribes from Europe, and their invasion in 449 changed Celtic Britain into Germanic England. The Norman conquest in 1066 AD resulted in the infusion of a large number of French words into the vocabulary of English from Europe to mainland Britain. The relationships between the Celts and the invaders is difficult to describe accurately, but they seemed to have settled down side by side in more or less peaceful contact with the Anglo-Saxons and combined to produce 7 kingdoms known as the Anglo-Saxon Heptarchy. The leadership of these kingdoms gradually passed into the hands of the Saxons because of their better political understanding. The Celtic languages were not used for any purpose by them. Neither did these languages influence the Saxons. Therefore, only a handful of Celtic words exist today, and most of them are names of places of rivers. Some of these better known are the following: place names: Dover, Cumberland, Kent, London, York. Names of rivers: Avon, Thames, Trent, Dee, Derwent. Some traces of Britain's Celtic past are also preserved in the first syllable of the names of some towns and districts in present-day England. These are Manchester, Winchester, Worcester, Gloucester, Lichfield, Salisbury, and Exeter. Another class of Celtic words preserved in modern English are words connected with religion or religious activities. Dialects of Old English. There is a clear line of descent from the speech of the Anglo-Saxons to modern English in matters of sounds, vocabulary, grammar, and spelling. But Old English was not a single uniform language. We can distinguish 4 dialects in Old English. They are Kentish, Northumbrian, Mercian, and West Saxon. Thus, it can be said that Old English was dialectical. This is understandable because 3 different Anglo-Saxon tribes were involved, and it was but natural that a variety in languages existed. Some characteristics of Old English. Some features of Old English make it very difficult to read and understand the texts of this period. The language looks different because of its alien spelling, unfamiliar vocabulary, and a totally different grammatical structure. The writing system of Old English of OE or Old English is very different from what we find with today. When the Anglo-Saxons came to England, they used a system of writing which was in use in the northern and western part of Europe, present-day Germany and Scandinavia. This writing system used the runic alphabet. The runic characters were composed of sharp straight lines without curves. Many of these letters are found on weapons such as arrows, axes, knife, handles, swords, etc. Some are to be seen in monuments, jewelry, and caskets made of bones, but their messages are difficult to derive as most of them are generally symbolic. After the 6th century, the spread of Christianity led to the gradual use of the Roman script, as this was the writing of the Latin religious texts. The Roman alphabet adopted by the Anglo-Saxons passed through some variations before it reached its present shape in modern English. The Old Saxon forms were superseded by French characters and some new letters were added to the alphabet, such as Q, W, W, J, J, after the Norman conquest of AD 1066. Foreign influences on Old English. The story of English is the story of repeated intrusions of foreign elements into the English vocabulary. From the earliest times, the country has been subjected to successive aggressions by foreign invaders such as the Romans, French, and Scandinavians. Earlier, they brought their own languages, but later bestowed on English a fair share of their vocabulary. In the Old English period, the two major influences were Latin and Scandinavian. Latin influence on Old English. Perhaps no single language has influenced English as much as Latin. Words in Latin existed in England before the coming of the Anglo-Saxons. In ancient times, Latin has the status of a world language. The languages of some European countries which had come under Roman rule had become Romanized, that is, Gaulish became French. However, this process of Romanization was halted by the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons and the collapse of the Roman Empire. Most of the borrowed words in Latin relate to the areas in which the supremacy of the Romans was recognized, that is, military, agriculture, and trade and commerce. Some examples are wall from Latin vallum, tile from Latin tacula, mile from Latin melia passum, and many derivatives. About 600 AD, Christianity began to spread in England together with the rise of literacy. The Christian missionaries translated a large number of Latin texts, mostly in Northumbrian, and made word glosses. Many of the following words in existence today are borrowed from Latin and are related to religion: heaven, hell, God, gospel, Easter, sin, altar, abbot, alms, angel, mass, nun, priest, etc. Other words relating to learning, science, medicine are history, grammatical, master, paper, school, verse, meter, anchor, cucumber, lily, candle, plant, tiger, and so on. A Scandinavian influence on Old English. The second major linguistic invasion of English came as a result of the Scandinavian attacks on England. They were the Germanic inhabitants of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, who as one time neighbors of the Anglo-Saxons in 5th century Europe were closely related to them in blood and language. These daring seafaring people were called Vikings. Viking is from the middle of the 8th century to the beginning of the 11th century. A Scandinavian influence on the vocabulary. Old English vocabulary, OE vocabulary. The result of 2 centuries of close contact with the Scandinavians had an unavoidable effect on the languages of the Anglo-Saxons. This influence was not immediately apparent because of the hostile relationship between the Danes and the Anglo-Saxons. Towards the end of the 9th century, peaceful coexistence prevailed and many Danish words entering English, which were very basic in nature. These words entered through everyday interaction. Some of these words are birth, bank, bull, call, clip, die, drag, egg, fellow, gap, give, get, guess, harbor, hit, hill, ill, kid, knife, leg, low, meek, muck, out, race, raise, root, rotten, scare, score, seat, sister, sky, sly, tight, trust, want, weak, window. Apart from this, Scandinavian borrowings are found in family names and place names. It is interesting to note that Scandinavian words were not restricted to nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Structure words like prepositions and conjunctions are other forms such as pronouns and adverbs. Structure words like prepositions and conjunctions and other forms such as pronouns and adverbs were freely borrowed. 3 Old English pronouns, I, her, him, were replaced by their Danish counterparts, they, their, them. Words like both, same, aloft, seemly, to, till, fro, thou are full all Scandinavian in origin, but the most remarkable borrowings is are, the plural form of the most basic verb in English, to be. Thus, the Scandinavian influence on Old English extended beyond the vocabulary to touch the grammatical system as well. Old English literature. The literature of the Anglo-Saxons is of 2 types. The first is that which was undoubtedly brought by the Germanic tribes when they invaded England and is preserved in the oral tradition. The second is manifest in the songs, poems, and religious writings found in manuscripts produced when literacy came to England. Unfortunately, only a fragment of Old English poetry has survived, and the manuscripts are the following. First is Beowulf. Second is the Junius. Third is the Exeter Book. And fourth is the Vercelli Book. The golden period of Old English literature was the era of King Alfred. He was a scholar, soldier, lawgiver, and ruler. When he became king, there were not enough scholars to read the Latin service books and the early Christian literature. King Alfred brought in teachers and scholars from abroad, and he himself set out to translate many of the works in Latin into West Saxon, including Bede's history. The most notable work inspired by Alfred was the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. This book is the first book of English prose and the first continuous history of a European nation in its own language. The year 1066 marks the end of Old English. The Norman conquest made England into little more than a colony of France. French became the language of the king's court, justice, governance, and education. The language of everyday speech among the upper class in England was French. The Normans had no interest in developing and patronizing a language such as English. In the absence of adequate patronage, English literary writing almost came to a standstill. However, it continued to be the language of the masses. Over period of time, due to close interaction and intermarriages, English began replacing French, first in the homes and later in the offices and schools. The children of the nobility spoke English as their mother tongue and had to be taught French in school. Thus, the English language survived the onslaught of the French rulers. Moreover, England was restored to English kings within 150 years of the Norman conquest.